Hey guys, it's Bex. Welcome to another video. I am going to be talking about the books that I read in January and February. I sometimes combine months because of different reasons. This time was mostly because in January I did not read very many books. I did a little bit better in February, but still not as many as I usually read. So I read a total of 7 books in those 2 months. And we had, well, hi Frodo. We had some pretty good books and also a couple, well, really only one like lower star rating, but overall pretty good. So we will start with the first book I read in January or finished in January, and that is a book that I actually started in November of 2023, and I just literally did not finish it until I think it was even like the middle of No, it was probably like the 10th or something of January, and it just took me forever to read. Hi. And that is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. So I've had my eye on TJ Klune for a little while, specifically this book and The House in the Cerulean Sea. I felt like this was going to be a good like fall read, so that's mostly why I picked it up instead of The House in the Cerulean Sea. But unfortunately, this book just wasn't really my cup of tea. If you've read this book, there's tea involved in it, like it literally says on the back. Welcome to Charon's Crossing. The tea is hot, the scones are fresh, and the dead are just passing through. Anyway. So this is a fantasy, I think it is considered, which I guess yes it is, but it's kind of a weird fantasy. It's not like one you would normally think of a fantasy, but it's about this guy Wallace, and Wallace at the very beginning of the book dies, and he's not a very good person. He's like rude to his employees, and his ex-wife hates him, and all he cares about is work, and he dies. And when he wakes up from dying, he basically realizes that he's like in this in-between state at this tea shop. He basically, it literally says this on the back, he sets about living a lifetime in 7 days because he's given only 1 week to cross over to, the other side. And it sounded really cute and heartwarming, and it was heartwarming, but I just found myself kind of bored. I believe I ended up giving it 3 stars. So yeah, basically my qualm with it was that I was just bored. I felt like it was just like kind of the same mundane things, and it could have been shorter. It's like not huge, but I think it's like 400, almost 400 pages, but it seemed bigger, which kind of sucks because I have this cool like copy of it, or maybe they all look like this, I have no idea, but it's pretty. Not a great start to the year. Next, I read a book on my Kindle, and this was a book I was really excited to read. I felt like I was going to really like it based on what I had heard about it, and that was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I have read a Rebecca Ross book once before, last year, and I didn't love it, to be honest. It was A River Enchanted. It just wasn't really for me, but I still wanted to give Divine Rivals a chance. It's on Kindle Unlimited. Pretty much every book I read on my Kindle, at least right now, is on Kindle Unlimited, by the way, so if I don't say that, I'm just saying that now. And I really loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I think it was so well written. I liked her writing in A River Enchanted too. It just wasn't my style of story, I guess, really, but this was. It's a fantasy romance about this girl Iris who is trying to become a writer, a journalist, and her rival at the place she works, Roman, ends up being her secret pen pal, I guess you can say. So she has her grandma's old typewriter, and it's magic magical. Somehow it is connecting her to Roman via the letters that she writes him on her typewriter. She doesn't know she's writing them to him. She thinks she's writing them to her brother, who is at war. Yeah, so the fantasy elements, the magical typewriter, there's like the war between gods, that kind of fantasy. So it definitely is fantasy, but it's also very much a romance between Iris and Roman. They were so adorable. I think the last half, but especially like the last 100 pages, were absolutely amazing and really bumped up my rating. I loved the book even leading up to that, but that helped. I will say that I feel like the romance, when it actually like came to be, was kind of abrupt. So that's really my only thing with it. But I really, really loved it, and I'm excited to read Ruthless Vows, which came out not very long ago. That is the second book in, I think it's just a duology. Then the next book I read was a mystery thriller, and that is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I have had this book for over a year, and for some reason had not read it yet, but I finally picked it up and read it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I believe I ended up rating it like a 4.25 stars. I found myself really excited to read it and not wanting to stop. The story was super interesting. So this is about this girl, Alicia, whose life is going amazing. She loves her life, and then randomly one day she decides apparently to shoot and kill her husband, then refuses to say another word, not just about that, but just in general. She just does not talk anymore, and because of that, people think she's like kind of gone crazy. So she's sent to a psychiatric unit instead of like jail. And then there's this psychotherapist, Theo, who is kind of obsessed with her case and just really wants to help her and, you know, learn why she did it. And since he is a psychotherapist, he gets a job at the unit that she is at. She becomes his patient, and he just sets out trying to help her and trying to figure out what happened. And there's like journal entries from Alicia from like the weeks leading up to the night that she shot her husband, which I really liked that aspect of it. Then I listened to a book on audio, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. That book was interesting. I was very unsure of like my thoughts on the book for most of it. There were times where I really, really liked it, and then there were times where I was just like, or I did not see the point in like what they were talking about in the book. So I think my final rating for that book is a 3.75 stars. Overall, I would say that I did like it. Two of the characters, which are pretty much the main characters, Sam and Sadie, were they were just a little bit annoying at times, and granted, for a good chunk of the book, they were pretty young, like in their college years, so they were definitely naive and stuff, but it basically follows Sam and Sadie starting from when they're like pretty much kids until they're like 40 years old. Follows their life and basically how they make video games together, so that's their job. It's just like a general literary fiction book about their lives, so if you don't like stories that are very character driven and there's not like a whole lot of plot, I definitely don't think you will like this book. I normally love books like that, and like I said, I did like this book, but it was a little bit on the lower rating for me as far as other books I've read that are like that. I also feel like the timeline jumped around a lot, and I think that is because it takes place over such a long time, and that's probably really hard to do in like a 400 however many page book it is. I do think I want to read more of her books. I have one of them actually physically, The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry. I really liked her writing, and I definitely want to give her other books a shot as well. Then the last book I actually read out of all these that I read physically is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I am just now mentioning this, but I made a video reading like viral books, and this book, Divine Rivals, and The Silent Patient were the books I read in that video, so I'll link that for you guys if you want to see it. This is a fantasy romance about this girl, Peyton, who's an ordinary in a world where there are ordinaries like her and elites like Kai. Kai is actually the prince of this kingdom, and in this society, ordinaries have been pretty much killed off because they are seen to be like a plague basically to the elites, where if the elites are around them, their powers will like disappear. So Hayden is one of the ordinaries that is alive still, and that is because she's pretty much pretended her whole life to be an elite, and that keeps her alive. And she gets thrown into these things called the purging trials. Her and Kai are both in them. Usually people die in these trials. It's very brutal. They think she's an elite, and so the elites have all these crazy powers that like help them survive, and she doesn't have any of that. So it's a pretty crazy story about the trials, and there's romance between her and Kai. And the next book comes out, I believe, this summer. I'm so excited to continue it. I really liked it. I honestly was like expecting it to be 5 stars, but it ended up being like a 4.5, 4.75. I still can't really decide, but I know it wasn't 5 stars. I can just tell, but I absolutely loved it still. It's getting so dark like by the minute, so I'm sorry. I have my light, my artificial light, so hopefully it isn't really making a huge difference on the lighting. Then I read on my Kindle a Kindle Unlimited book again, and that is called Trial of the Sun Queen. It is again a fantasy romance series. The first 2 books are out, I believe, and the 3rd book comes out this year. I don't know how long the series is going to be. I honestly have never heard of it until pretty much this last month. It was the monthly pick in the book club I'm a part of, and that is why I read it. It sounded super interesting, and so I voted for it too. It's basically about this girl, Lore, and she lives, I think she's, how old is she? I think she's like 26. She lives in this prison. She's lived there since she was 12 years old. She got thrown in there with her sister and her brother, and basically one day when she's in like solitary confinement, she gets taken by some random person and sent to this other kingdom, and she gets thrown into these trials. Again, I literally read a book about the purging trials in Powerless, and then I read a book about these like different kind of trials in this book. These trials are different because the 10 girls, I believe, are trying to win the title of the Sun Queen. So the Sun King is holding these trials to find his wife and queen, and she has no idea why she's chosen to be the last tribute. She has to pretend she's from like this kind of dump of a city in this kingdom where she's really not from at all, but no one can know that she's from the other kingdom. Meanwhile, the kingdom that she is from is like looking for her because they have no idea where she went, because all of a sudden she was in solitary confinement and then wasn't there anymore. I honestly had no idea what to expect because I hadn't heard of it, but I ended up reading it 4.25 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it like a lot. I think the beginning was a little bit slow to get into, but even with saying that, I wasn't like, I'm so bored, when's this book gonna get good? I was still like, okay, time to read, like, yay. But then when I got like 40% of the way in, I feel like, I was like, and I read like so fast. Like I think I've read the last like 60% of this book in like 2 days, which is really fast for me. Overall, it took me like a week to read, but the first like 40% took me like a majority of that time. So if that sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend it. I definitely want to continue the series. The second book is also on Kindle Unlimited, so I definitely will be reading that. And the very last book that I actually just finished today, which is the last day of February, so I barely got it in time, but I listened to it on audiobook, and that is Betting on You by Lynn Painter. This is my 3rd Lynn Painter book. I so far have really enjoyed her books. I read The Do-Over by her first. I rated it 4 stars. Then I read Better Than the Movies, which I absolutely loved. 5-star book for me. So I thought I would try out another one of her young adult books. All 3 of these have been young adult romances, and I really liked this book too. I honestly haven't had a ton of time to kind of think about my rating, but off the top of my head right now, I think I'm at like a 4.25. maybe even 4.5, because I definitely did like it better than the Do-Over from what I remember. Somewhere around there, but it is just so cute. Her writing is so cute. She does young adult romances so well. I do want to read some of her adult romances, and we'll see how I like those. But this book has fake dating, which I actually did not know about until I got to that part in the book, and I love fake dating. And it follows, I literally almost just said the guy's name from Better Than the Movies. It follows Bailey and Charlie. Over the last couple of years, they have ran into each other like 2 or 3 times, and they're both like, this boy is so annoying, like, why do I keep running into him? But then they get a job at the same place, so they obviously like start seeing each other a lot more, and they kind of have some like bets going on, which is why it's called Betting on You. And they also are trying to get Bailey's mom's boyfriend kind of out of the picture, because she's just like, I'm not ready to have a stepdad. Like, she doesn't want her whole life changing quite yet, so he kind of helps her with that, and romance ensues, and it was very, very cute. I really enjoyed it and would highly recommend it if you like cute, you know, cheesy YA romances. Apparently I really do. So that is all for the books that I read in January and February. I am already behind in my reading goal this year, so yay. But we are going to catch up. I just, for some reason, haven't been reading a ton lately, but we are going to change that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and got some recommendations. Let me know if you've read any of these books and your thoughts, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!